Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about this challenge that a lot of us have of really how do we get these leaders that we work with, how do we get decision makers to buy into new CX initiatives? So, and before I move on, thank you to David for getting us started. As always, I always appreciate hearing from you guys where you are in the world, and it's so cool that you guys are all over the world. So thanks for spending some time. So for those of you who maybe haven't been here before, don't know me, I'm Jeannie, and I have been doing customer experience work of some sort for about 20 years. And I started this company in 2008, and we've just been really working with our clients to provide qualitative assessments, to help with journey mapping, training, empowerment, employee experience work, all those things. And the mission of my company is to create fewer ruined days for customers, because I believe that makes a better world. I know that sounds really lofty, but it's really true. I really think that if we are there for our customers and we provide positive moments for them, then they carry that off to the world. And I know all of you are here because that's what you want to do too. So I appreciate that you being here is helping me live my mission, and I really appreciate that. And if you want to follow up, we have all these different ways. I have several courses at LinkedIn Learning. If you want to learn more, and specifically about journey mapping, service blueprinting, and some other things. So there's a link there. And we also have a 21-day challenge many of you have participated in. It's just an email a day to help you really remember what's most important, a little task, something to keep that momentum going to get you started or to just kickstart again. So hopefully some of those resources will be valuable to you. And also, I love hearing from you. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you want. So let's get started. So first of all, let's talk about the reality of the situation. We have often talked about customer experience as this soft thing. It can be kind of nebulous. A lot of people, a lot of keynote speakers, I am one of them, I admit, but a lot of people get on stages and say, I've got the answer. You just have to be really nice to your customers. And I wish it were that easy. I wish it were something that we could just wave a magic wand. And so what happened is a lot of customer experience initiatives in kind of historical, context, they got started, but they didn't really go anywhere because they got started based on a premise that was a little too soft to sell. When we talk about business, it's really about outcomes that we're looking for. You cannot be in business unless you're making money, unless you're able to provide what customers want, all of these things. And so if you're not connecting those business outcomes with customer experience initiatives, then it's really easy for decision makers to say, we tried this before. And sometimes what they mean by that is we tried to be customer centric for like 2 months, and they didn't see immediate results. And that's because we have often kind of sidelined customer experience. If you look at any business plan, any traditional business plan, some of this is changing, but they mention things like, how will you market your product? What does the product development look like? How are you selling? And then it kind of stops. And so we haven't trained business people to really think about, what does customer experience do for the organization? So when you're talking to decision makers, my hope for you today is that you'll learn a few things that you can use in your arguments to really get that funding, to get that support, so that you can provide the best customer experience you can for your customers. So I like to think about communication as, how can we really get the message that we want across? And one of the best lessons I ever learned was that the way to communicate, the way that we internalize information is really about 3 things, and it's logic, emotion, and symbolism. And some of us have more logic, more of a need for logic when we hear those things. Some of us have more of a need for emotion. Some of us have more of a need for symbolism. But we all incorporate all those 3 things in our brain, and we need those to kind of line up nicely in order for us to go, oh, okay, I get it. And so that's how I want you to think about when you go in and you talk to your leaders about, here's how we want to move forward, and here's the investment we need, and here's the support we need. So here are the common objections that we're going to walk through today. And I'm sure some of you have heard these before and might be hearing them right now. Our teams are already too busy. Customer experience is too great of a financial investment. We hear that one a lot. The benefits of customer experience initiatives are just too hard to quantify. We can't tell what it really does for the organization. And then we also hear things like, well, we're going to focus on sales right now, not customer experience. And I want to give you some arguments back for this. And so one of the things that we're going to walk through today are the realities of these. So customer experience done well actually saves teams time. When CX is done well, it actually can cut costs. We can provide that ROI. We just have to look for the right way to do it, the return on investment. And then the last thing is, you know what? Customer experience builds sales. It builds sales, which is amazing and fantastic. So let's talk about this first one. We're too busy, especially right now. There's a lot of pressure on customer experience teams and leaders. And so if they're really frustrated, if they are feeling like we don't have enough time to do what we need to do, and you come and say, oh my gosh, you know what, we should really look at this for customer experience, they might say, we don't have time for that. We don't have time. The thing about that is if customer experience is done well, it actually saves time. When you think about the flip side of this, if you have a lot of service issues, if you have a lot of customer experience issues, if you have a lot of customers out there complaining about your brand in the real world on social media or wherever they can, then that actually is costing you time. That actually is meaning that your people are responding and reacting and putting out fires instead of really maybe giving you their best selves, giving you what they could actually provide long-term for your organization. So if you have a whole bunch of service issues because you're not investing in the customer experience, then you are going to spend a lot of your time there. So by taking a step back, and I know how challenging this can be when you have that actually happening. It's really hard to say, you know what we need to do is actually look at this proactively. When you're putting out all those fires, that's a really hard argument. What I would suggest is you say, we're going to keep doing this, but let's talk about what can we do? What can we do today to make sure that we are proactively planning to avoid this in the future, to make sure that we can take some of this time back in the future so that our people can really focus on what they intend to focus on. I mean, we've heard the stories about when there are service issues and the CEO has to go, answer calls in the call center because it's so bad. That's probably not the best use of his time. So make sure that when you're talking about this argument, it might not be in that moment. But if you can proactively plan ahead, then that means that you can avoid this in the future. You can take some of that time back. Otherwise, you're just going to be cycling in this, putting out fires for a really long time. So it actually can save your team's time. The other objection we hear is that customer experience is too great a financial investment. It costs too much. Now, when we look back historically, again, one of the things that happened with customer experience was it became really exciting. People got very excited about the idea of it. So they did things like they said, you know what, we're going to put the customer first. And the way they did that was a banner in the lobby and maybe a big rah-rah town hall meeting. And maybe they did things like put up a sign in every office saying, don't forget the customer. And then they kind of moved on with their lives. And so I call this when people take the approach of platitudes equal customer experience. Customer experience is a mindset, a strategy, and a discipline, and we need to treat it like that. And so by saying that it's too great of a financial investment, they might have some of those battle wounds from the past. So I would ask them, how have you invested in the past? Then I would also point out that when customer experience is done well, it actually cuts costs. Because there are only two ways to make money in business. You either have to make a lot more top line revenue, or you have to cut your expenses. In today's world, a lot of leaders are most concerned with cutting the expenses. They might not have the vision of the sales forecast that they had 6 months ago. So now they're looking at, okay, how can we do this? How can we make sure to reduce our expenses? when you have people who have service issues calling into your contact center, for instance, each one of those calls costs money. It costs money to staff, it costs money for the technology, it costs all these things. And if you have a lot of issues that are complex, then there's a lot of time on that call too. And this is just one example, but I want you to really get creative and think about what are the ways that we could reduce costs on the service side of things that would help us reduce expenses overall. And you can even do this with formulas. You can say, okay, well, let's say that today, and these are very round numbers, and I'm sure some of you are thinking $7. Yes, that's way too much for any call, but let's just do this for fun. So you can actually say, okay, let's say we know today that we get 100,000 calls in our contact center a year. And we know that each of those costs an average of $7. So right now we have $700,000 in our contact center costs just around these calls. So if you can say, okay, if we could proactively avoid some of these calls, if we could invest to make sure that we understand our customer journey better and we can predictively and proactively serve them so they don't have the need to call in, then you can start seeing the reduction and you can start saying, okay, let's say we turn that down 10%. Let's say we get 10% fewer calls in our contact center. What would that mean to us? And once you do that, then you can start arguing for, okay, let's say we save, $70,000. Well, could we invest $40,000 in that to help us prepare in the future to avoid some of these things? Once you start making those equations, you're still reducing expenses, but you're also proactively serving customers, which ultimately will not only reduce cost, but ultimately deliver on those business outcomes that you're looking for. And we'll talk about that too. So there are all sorts of ways that you can start connecting these dots with real business outcomes, the goals of a business, and what CX actually does for it. So the other thing that we hear a lot is that these initiatives are just too hard to quantify. And again, I'm going to throw back to that era of let's put a banner up and say that we're customer centric. Or I've also seen a lot of organizations that invest in things like customer journey mapping, and they have a huge initiative and they're very proud of themselves and they put the map on the wall and then they don't actually use it. A journey map is a tool. A lot of the things that we do in customer experience, we have to actually create the tool and then we have to use the tool. And so in this case, a lot of times they have seen things like that where they say, oh, we put together that journey map and it didn't do anything for us. It didn't make us any money. Well, it's not going to make you money being a poster on the wall. So we have to really start understanding the context of these leaders. What have they seen that didn't work? Why didn't it work? And start there, and then start thinking about, okay, how can we make sure that our argument to really help them make better decisions is available to them? And so if we have the metrics available, you might be tracking things like customer satisfaction, CSAT, or Net Promoter Score, which is NPS, or even customer effort score, which is CES. If you are tracking any or a combination of those things, maybe you're tracking first call resolution, maybe you're tracking referral rates and retention rates, all of those things. If you are investing, let's say, in the customer experience and you say, let's get our NPS higher, and you know that you've benchmarked lower in your industry, you know that you're not where you should be. So if we could increase NPS, what would that mean for our retention rate? What would that mean for our revenue rate? And start pulling that thread, figuring out, okay, what would it mean if we could show them, if we could quantify that if we can boost NPS by 1%, that could mean millions of dollars of revenue in some cases. Because if you have people who are happier, who are not going to defect to your competition, who will remain loyal, have longer customer lifetime values, then you will see those business outcomes that you're looking for. The other thing about tracking that I want you to think about is that if you start really understanding these numbers and metrics, and if you're tracking them month after month, then that can tell you that we are, that can start telling you kind of the canary in the coal mine, meaning that you'll start seeing something and you'll say, oh, NPS went down a little bit. Now, that doesn't tell you exactly what you need to know, but if you start investigating, thus the name of my company, I really believe in this. If you start investigating that, NPS went down this way before, and it was because our delivery was slower or we weren't meeting expectations somewhere in the journey. What can we do about that? Then you don't have to wait for the giant dip of something to happen where it's a crisis. You can start seeing things before it becomes readily available to everybody in data. You will start getting that sixth sense about, okay, if this happened before, let's look into why it's happening now and do something about it so that it doesn't become a crisis. So there are all sorts of ways that you can start really understanding your CX metrics and how they actually benefit the overall metrics of the organization and the outcomes that you're looking for. And then we also hear this one, we need to focus on sales, not customer experience. Now, this one I understand is kind of the way that we've been taught. If you need more money in your organization, the first thing you want to do is increase sales, right? Well, that's all fine and good. But if you do that, and let's say you get a bunch of people in, but sales isn't setting the right expectations for your customer experience because they're only focused on getting that sale, then that's going to backfire pretty quickly. Customers will be upset, they will complain, they will become defectors, meaning that they will proactively tell other people to avoid your brand. And so if you invest in great customer experience, it actually builds sales. And there are several examples of this, but think about how Nordstrom, for instance, one of the great retailers that we have, they invest in customer experience, and they often, time after time, quarter after quarter, have higher revenue, higher sales than their competitors. They are much better positioned than some other retailers out there right now to weather this storm that we're in, because their customers understand that they still have great experience digitally or in a store. And not everybody invested that way. A lot of retailers actually said, we only care about discounts and sales. We just want people in the stores buying things. And they kind of let the customer experience go. And now they're really, really suffering because their customers simply don't trust them right now to have great experiences. And it did not build sales long term. And so we really have to build this case that, first of all, sales sets expectation for the customer experience. So if we don't really understand the customer experience, if we don't really have a great handle on the experience that we want to deliver, then we're not going to set the right expectations in sales. So that's one thing. The other thing is sales can be very short term. They can be a very short term solution. And what we want to do is build long-term solutions. And that means investing in the customer experience long term. So now you have all of these facts and figures, and you have all of these different ways that you can connect these dots and present a really logical argument. But we still want to address the second part of this equation, which is the emotion of the storytelling. And so customer stories can move us a lot more than metrics. We all got so excited about data a couple of years ago. People were very proud to show me their dashboards with the different graphs and everything else. And those are great, but they don't really touch us in our hearts. And what we want to do is say to these leaders, listen, this is real. These are real people with real stories. And our brand is either letting them down or lifting them up. And so when we look at how to build this case, reach out, try to find those great customer stories. That can be a recording from your call center. That can be an email from a grateful customer or a frustrated customer. That can even be a video now. In the blog that I had this week about this topic, I shared that there was a webinar I saw with Dakota and CX Workout, who I mentioned before. And CX Workout has a great feature where you can ask people to send in selfie videos. And they asked people, what is this pandemic doing to you emotionally? And they got these amazing responses. And so really seeing somebody, there's a picture of it, but the this woman was crying saying, I'm just really scared and I'm alone. And seeing her say that, seeing her emotionally share that, I mean, that's got to affect you as a human being. And so we want to remember that all of these numbers, all these things that we just talked about, they are connected to real people and real people with real challenges and real opportunities and real relationships with our brand. And so we really want to zero in on that and make sure that we're sharing some of that as well. And then the last part of that equation of logic, emotion, and symbolism, when I talk about symbolism, I'm really talking about kind of what is that vision? What does it mean to be part of our brand? What does it mean to live our customer experience? And so you want to wrap this up with a clear picture of what that means for your brand, for your customers, and your leadership. So if you are appealing to a CEO and a CFO, let's say a chief financial officer, they might be motivated by different things. They might have a different vision for what it means for them as individuals. I encourage you to think about that. Whoever you're presenting to, think about what is really important to them as a person. And then try to paint that picture of the vision that you have and why this is important for them as well as the brand. So make sure that you're really thinking about how this is going to help not only us, be a better business ultimately, but it's also going to help our customers in really important ways. It's going to help our employees feel more engaged so that we might have more loyal employees if we can invest in the customer experience. Anything like that that you can see that really helps you think about what does this really mean for us and our brand? And so if you can hit those 3 points, you can make a much stronger argument for why it's important to invest in these customer experience initiatives and the outcomes that you can expect by doing so. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. If so, make sure to subscribe. We do these webinars every Friday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn Live and right here on YouTube. And if you've got a question, don't be shy. Ask in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. You're here for your customers. I'm here for you.